In a world where everyone is performing their life for an audience, there are people who have chosen silence, who watch from the shadows, who exist fully but refuse to document that existence for public consumption. And their absence speaks louder than 1,000 posts ever could. Picture someone you know, maybe it's you, who has a social media account but never uses it. No photos, no status updates, no stories, no likes, no comments, no trace of their daily life scattered across the internet for consumption. Their profile picture is years old, maybe a default image, maybe nothing at all. Their bio is blank or cryptic. Their feed is a ghost town. The last post, if there is one, is from years ago, a relic from a different version of themselves. To the outside world, they might as well not exist. They're the digital equivalent of a rumor. People know they're out there, somewhere, living a life. But what that life looks like, that remains a mystery. And in our current era, where existence seems to require documentation, where experiences aren't real unless they're posted, where identity is curated and broadcast and validated through likes and comments, these silent people are strange, suspicious even. Why don't you post anything? Are you okay? What are you hiding? People ask these questions because in a culture of constant sharing, privacy has become pathologized. Silence has become suspect. But here's what most people don't understand. The person who doesn't post on social media isn't necessarily sad, isolated, or hiding. They're not antisocial or technologically inept. They're not bitter or jealous of others' curated lives. They've simply made a different calculation, a different choice about what parts of themselves to give to the world and what parts to keep sacred. And that choice, that refusal to perform their life for public consumption, reveals something profound about who they are and how they move through the world. Part 1. The Profiles of Silence. Let me show you the different types of people who don't post on social media, because they're not all the same. The deliberate abstainer. This person made a conscious, intentional choice to stop posting or never start. They thought about it, weighed the costs and benefits, and decided the costs, the performance, the comparison, the constant documentation, the commodification of experience weren't worth the benefits. They're not against social media as a concept. They might even scroll occasionally, keeping up with others, but they refuse to participate actively. They refuse to feed the machine with their own content. Their silence is philosophical, political even, a statement about what they will and won't give to the attention economy. The deeply private. This person has always been private, long before social media existed. They don't share personal information easily. They don't like being perceived or analyzed or known by people they haven't explicitly let in. The idea of posting their life, their face, their thoughts, their experiences to a public platform where strangers can see and judge, it feels like standing naked in a crowded room, violating, wrong. It's not shyness exactly. It's a bone-deep need for privacy, for control over who knows what about them, for boundaries around their inner world. Social media violates all of that, so they don't use it. Simple as that. The burnt-out performer. This person used to post a lot, maybe. They curated their life, took the photos, wrote the captions, engaged with the comments. They performed their existence for an audience. And then at some point they got exhausted. They saw through the game. They realized they were living for documentation rather than experience. that they were choosing activities and moments based on how they'd look in a post rather than how they'd feel to live. So they stopped, went silent, disappeared from the feeds, not because they're depressed or isolating, but because they're reclaiming their life from the performance of it. The authenticity seeker. This person finds social media fundamentally dishonest, not necessarily in a judgmental way toward others, but as incompatible with their own values. They can't post the highlight reel when they know it's leaving out the struggle. They can't filter and edit their life into something more palatable when that feels like lying. They can't perform happiness when they're not happy, success when they're struggling. And since social media rewards the curated, the filtered, the performed, since authenticity is actually punished in an economy that values aspirational content, they opt out. They'd rather be real in private than fake in public. The overcorrector. This person saw what social media was doing to them. The comparison, the anxiety, the dopamine addiction, the time wasted, and they reacted strongly, maybe too strongly. They deleted everything, went completely dark, made their absence almost as loud as others' presence. Their non-participation is partly healthy boundary setting and partly a reaction formation against their own previous overuse. They're the recovered addict who can't be in the same room as the substance, the genuinely uninterested. And then there's this person who simply doesn't care. Social media doesn't interest them. They're not against it philosophically. They're not protecting their privacy zealously. They're not making a statement. They just don't care. They have other things to do, other ways of connecting, other sources of validation and entertainment. Their absence is the most neutral and perhaps the most radical because it's not a reaction to anything. It's just genuine disinterest in something the culture insists everyone should want. Part 2, the psychology, what silence reveals. So what does it mean, psychologically, when someone doesn't post on social media? A different relationship with validation. People who don't post have found or are actively seeking validation from sources other than public approval. Most social media use is driven by the need for external validation. We post, we wait, we refresh, we check the likes and comments. We're seeking confirmation that we exist, that we matter, that we're interesting or attractive or successful or funny. It's not shallow. It's human. We're social creatures who need to know we belong, that we're valued by our community. But people who don't post have either found other sources for that validation, deep friendships, creative work, internal self-worth, or they're still struggling with the lack of it, but refusing to seek it in the toxic way social media provides. They've decided that real validation comes from depth, not breadth, from people who actually know them, not from strangers who double tap. A resistance to commodification. There's something inherently commodifying about social media. Your life becomes content. Your experiences become posts. Your relationships become photo opportunities. You become a brand. Whether you intend to or not, people who don't post often have a deep resistance to this. They refuse to turn their life into a product for consumption. They refuse to think of their experiences in terms of how they'll translate to content. They want to live for the sake of living, not for the sake of documenting. This isn't elitist or pretentious. It's a recognition that when you're always thinking about how to package your life for an audience, you're not fully living it. You're performing it. And the performance, no matter how authentic you try to keep it, changes the experience itself. A lower need for social visibility. Some people simply have a lower need for social visibility than others. They don't need to be seen by many to feel real. They don't need their existence confirmed by a wide audience. This might come from secure attachment in childhood. They internalize that they matter regardless of external validation. Or it might come from introversion. They genuinely prefer depth over breadth in relationships. Or it might be something else entirely. But whatever the source, they've found that their sense of self doesn't require public witnessing. They exist fully in private, and that's enough. A sophisticated understanding of social dynamics. People who don't post often understand something that active users haven't fully grasped. Social media isn't neutral. It's not just a tool for connection. It's a machine designed to capture attention, harvest data, and monetize human psychology. Every post you make, every like you give, every minute you spend scrolling, you're not the customer. You're the product. Your attention is being sold. Your data is being harvested. Your psychology is being exploited. People who don't post see this clearly, and they refuse to participate. It's not paranoia. It's clear-eyed understanding of how these systems work and a choice to opt out. Part 3. The childhood roots. Why does one person become someone who documents everything, and another becomes someone who shares nothing? Often, the answer lies in childhood. The child who was overexposed. Some people who don't post grew up in families where their privacy was violated, where parents shared too much about them, where their lives were documented and displayed without their consent. Maybe it was the parent who overshared on early social media or in social situations, who told embarrassing stories, who showed photos to strangers, who treated their child's life as public property. That child grew up with a violated sense of privacy, and as an adult, they overcorrect. They lock everything down. They share nothing because they never got to choose what was public and what was private when they were young. The child who learned to be invisible. We've talked about the ignored child in previous videos. Some of those children grow into adults who don't post on social media, not because they're still trying to be invisible, but because they never learned that their life was worth sharing. They internalize the message that what happens to them isn't interesting, that their thoughts and experiences don't matter, that no one really wants to see or hear from them. So as adults, even when social media offers them a platform, they don't use it because deep down, they still believe, why would anyone care what I'm doing? It's not humility. It's a wound. The child who valued depth over performance. Some children grow up in families or environments that valued authenticity over appearance, where real connection mattered more than public image, where experiences were lived for their own sake, not for how they'd look to others. These children become adults who find social media fundamentally shallow, not in a judgmental way necessarily, but as incompatible with the values they were raised with. They were taught it's not about what people think, it's about who you really are. And social media is almost entirely about what people think, so they opt out. The child who was burned by public judgment. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they were humiliated publicly. Maybe they made a mistake that became public knowledge and learned the hard way that visibility can be dangerous. These children grow into adults who are extremely cautious about what they make public. They learned early. Once something is out there, you can't control how it's used against you. So they share nothing. They stay in the shadows. They protect themselves through invisibility. It's not paranoia. It's learned caution from past pain. Part 4. The social dynamics of not posting. Let's talk about how people who don't post experience social relationships differently. They're the mystery. In a world of oversharing, the person who shares nothing becomes intriguing, mysterious. People wonder about them. Who are they really? What are they doing? What's their life like? Sometimes this works in their favor. People are drawn to mystery, to the person who hasn't revealed everything in their bio. Sometimes it works against them. People fill in the blanks with their own projections, often negative ones. They must be hiding something. They must be unhappy. They must be judging everyone who does post. The mystery can be powerful or isolating depending on the context. They miss out, and they're okay with that. There's a real cost to not being on social media. You miss invitations that are only posted in Facebook events. You miss news shared only through Instagram stories. You're out of the loop on group chats and shared jokes and evolving social dynamics. People who don't post know this, and they've accepted it. They've made the calculation. The cost of missing out is worth the benefit of protecting their attention, their privacy, their peace. It's not that they don't value connection. They value it so much they refuse to settle for the shallow version social media offers. They have deeper, fewer relationships. Without social media, you can't maintain the illusion of connection with hundreds of people. You can't keep up with acquaintances through their posts. You can't give and receive the casual digital affirmations that make people feel connected without actual connection. So people who don't post tend to have fewer relationships, but the ones they have are deeper, more intentional, more real. They're not friends with 847 people. They have 8 to 10 people they actually talk to, actually see, actually know. It's a different model of social connection, not better or worse necessarily, just different. They're often misunderstood. Why don't you ever like my post? Did you see what I posted? You're so hard to keep up with. People who don't post hear these things a lot, and there's often hurt or confusion behind them. People take the non-participation personally. If they cared about me, they'd engage with my post. If they were really my friend, they'd share things with me online. It's a fundamental misunderstanding. The person who doesn't post often cares deeply. They just express it differently. They'll call you. They'll show up in person. They'll remember details of your life without needing to see them posted. But in a culture that has conflated online engagement with caring, their offline care becomes invisible. Part 5. The philosophy, choosing not to document. Let's go deeper into the philosophy behind not posting. Because for many people, it's not just a preference, it's a worldview. Experience. Over documentation. There's a famous quote, often misattributed. Those who danced were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. People who don't post are dancing without documenting the dance. They're experiencing life without feeling the need to prove that experience to others. They go to beautiful places and just look. They don't spend half the time finding the perfect angle, filtering the shot, crafting the caption. They have profound moments and let them remain private. sacred even. They understand something essential. The act of documenting changes the experience. When you're thinking about how to capture and present a moment, you're not fully in it. So they choose presence over documentation, being over-performing. Privacy as a right, not a privilege. In the current cultural moment, privacy has become almost transgressive. We're expected to share, to be visible, to document our lives for public consumption. People who don't post are pushing back against this. They're saying, "Waste my privacy is not something I need to justify. It's my default right." They refuse to accept that having a private life is weird or suspicious or something that needs explanation. They're reclaiming privacy as normal, as healthy, as something that doesn't require an apology or justification. Resistance to the attention economy. Social media platforms are designed to extract attention and convert it into profit. Every post, like, comment, and scroll is generating data and revenue for corporations. People who don't post often see this clearly and refuse to participate. They recognize that their attention is valuable, maybe the most valuable thing they have, and they're not willing to give it away for free to platforms that profit from their engagement. This isn't anti-technology. It's pro-intentionality. It's choosing carefully where attention goes rather than letting it be harvested by systems designed to be addictive. Authenticity that can't be performed. Here's a paradox. The more you try to perform authenticity on social media, the less authentic you become. You can post real photos, write honest captions, share vulnerable moments, but if you're doing it for an audience, if you're thinking about how it will be received, what people will think, whether it will get engagement, it's still performance. People who don't post have often realized this. They've realized that real authenticity can't be performed. It can only be lived in private with people who actually know you. So they stop performing. And in stopping, they become more real. Part 6, the shadow side, when not posting becomes problematic. But let's be honest, not posting isn't always healthy. Sometimes it comes from a place that's worth examining. Superiority and judgment. Some people who don't post have developed a sense of superiority about it. They look down on people who do post. They judge them as shallow, narcissistic, attention-seeking. They've turned their choice into moral high ground. And that's just another form of ego, no better than the ego that needs validation through likes. Real security in your choice doesn't require judging others for making a different one. Fear masquerading as choice. Sometimes people don't post because they're afraid of judgment, afraid of not being good enough, afraid their life isn't interesting or beautiful or worthy of sharing. They tell themselves they're making an intentional choice about privacy and authenticity, but really they're hiding, protecting themselves from potential rejection by never putting themselves out there. There's a difference between choosing privacy from a place of confidence and choosing it from a place of fear. Missing out on genuine connection. While social media can be shallow, it can also facilitate real connection. Finding communities of people with shared interests or experiences, maintaining relationships across distance, discovering opportunities. People who completely abstain sometimes cut themselves off from these benefits out of rigid principle. They throw out the baby with the bathwater. The healthiest approach might not be complete abstinence, but intentional boundaried use. Using privacy as a shield against vulnerability. Some people use the excuse of "I'm just private" to avoid all vulnerability. They never share anything real with anyone, online or offline. Their refusal to post becomes part of a larger pattern of emotional unavailability, of keeping everyone at arm's length, of never letting anyone in. Privacy is healthy. Walls that prevent all intimacy are not. Tier 7. The cultural divide. Not posting on social media has become a cultural marker, and like all cultural markers, it reveals and creates divides, generational differences. Younger generations, millennials, and especially Gen Z, grew up with social media as a native part of their social world. For them, not having a presence online can mean actual social exclusion. Older generations, Gen X and Boomers, often remember life before social media and feel less compelled to participate. Their friendships and identities were formed offline, so they can maintain them offline. A 20-year-old who doesn't post is making a much more countercultural choice than a 50-year-old who doesn't post. The costs and meanings are different. Class and professional implications. In some professional worlds, having no social media presence is a disadvantage. Networking happens online. Opportunities are discovered through platforms. Personal branding is expected. In other worlds, having a carefully curated absence, being the person who's too serious, too successful, too important to need social media, becomes its own form of status. Whether not posting helps or hurts you professionally depends entirely on context. The urban-rural divide. In urban environments, especially among younger educated demographics, being extremely online is normalized. Your social life might actually happen primarily through digital platforms. In rural environments, in-person community is still more central. People know each other through physical proximity, not online connection. Not posting means different things in different places. Part 8. What others project onto silence. The fascinating thing about people who don't post is how much others project onto their silence. They must be depressed. People often assume that someone who doesn't post must be struggling, isolated, sad, unable to participate in normal social life. Sometimes this is true, but often it's projection. The person assuming that because they would only withdraw if they were depressed, everyone must be the same. They're judging everyone else. People often feel judged by those who don't post, as if the absence is a silent condemnation of their own participation. She thinks she's better than us. He's probably sitting there judging everyone's posts. Sometimes this is accurate. Some people who don't post are judging, but often they're not thinking about it at all. They're just living their life differently. The judgment says more about the person feeling judged than about the person who's absent. They're hiding something. In an age of transparency, privacy becomes suspicious. People wonder, what are they hiding? A secret life, a failed life, something shameful. Usually they're not hiding anything more than anyone else is. They just don't feel compelled to prove that to strangers. They don't care about me. This is the most painful projection. People take non-engagement personally. If they cared, they'd like my posts. If I mattered to them, they'd comment. But often the person who doesn't post cares deeply. They just express it through calls, visits, remembering details, showing up in real life. The conflation of digital engagement with caring is one of social media's most damaging effects. Part 9, the future. As social media evolves. As social media continues to evolve, so does the meaning of not participating. The pendulum swing. There are signs that the culture is beginning to shift, that constant documentation is losing its appeal, that privacy is being reclaimed, that people are exhausted by performance. The person who doesn't post might be ahead of a curve, pioneering what will eventually become more normal, or maybe not. Maybe the trajectory is toward more integration of digital and physical life, not less. And those who abstain will become increasingly marginalized. Time will tell. New platforms, same dynamics. As platforms change, Instagram giving way to TikTok, TikTok giving way to whatever comes next, the fundamental dynamics remain. There will always be people who post and people who don't, people who perform and people who protect, people who seek validation externally and people who find it internally. The tools change, the psychology doesn't. Part 10, The Invitation, What Silence Teaches. What can we learn from people who don't post on social media? That presence is more important than documentation? That being fully in an experience matters more than capturing it for others? That sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones we keep private? That life can be rich and full and deeply lived without anyone witnessing it but ourselves? That validation can come from within? That we don't need public approval to know we matter? That the opinions of people who actually know us are worth more than the likes of people who don't? That we can exist fully without performing that existence for an audience? That boundaries are healthy? That we get to choose what we share and what we keep private? That saying "this is mine, not yours" is an act of self-respect, not selfishness? That protecting our attention and our inner life from constant external consumption is necessary for well-being? That connection can be deep rather than broad? That quality matters more than quantity? That 10 real friendships are worth more than 1,000 superficial ones? That you can be deeply connected to life and to people without broadcasting that connection to the world? Conclusion: the power of choosing silence. In a world that demands constant visibility, constant performance, constant documentation, the person who chooses silence is radical. Not because they're better than anyone else, not because they've transcended the need for connection or validation, not because they're immune to the human desire to be seen, but because they've made a different calculation about what they're willing to give away. They've decided that their life is not content, that their experiences are not commodities, that their existence doesn't require public documentation to be real. They've chosen to live for themselves rather than for an audience. And in doing so, they're asking all of us a question. What would your life look like if no one was watching? If you couldn't post it, couldn't document it, couldn't get validation for it, would you still do it? Would it still matter? Would you still be okay? For people who don't post on social media, the answer is yes. They know who they are without the mirror of public approval. They know their life has value without needing to prove it. They know they exist fully and completely whether anyone's watching or not. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful form of existence in the digital age. Not the most visible, not the most celebrated, not the most liked, but the most real, the most free, the most fully lived. If you don't post on social media, you're not weird. You're not antisocial. You're not missing out. You've simply chosen to live your life instead of performing it.